Well, Chief, I've started the recording.
Okay, call this meeting to order. There's one change to the agenda. The executive session at the end of the meeting is for WLFEA board members. It was incorrectly specified that it was for both districts, but just WLFEA board members. And we did modify Agenda Bill 8A. That's when we're talking about the local government investment pool. I was a little confused when I read their letter, but we've cleared that up, and we'll talk about that when we get to that point. So now, if everybody would mute themselves and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. There's a flag up there on Dina's screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Republic
Stands nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Holly, could you take roll?
Yes. Siuslaw Valley Fire Directors. Director Hickson.
Here.
Director Polisi.
Here.
Director Spade.
Present.
Director Green.
Here.
Director Burns.
Here.
All right. Western Lane Ambulance Directors. Director Murphy.
Here.
Director Russell.
Here.
Director Webb.
Here.
Director Yesney.
Here.
Director Farnsworth.
Here.
And our WLFEA directors. Director Polisi.
Here.
Director Spade.
Here.
Director Murphy.
Here.
And Director Russell.
Here.
Great, we have a quorum for all three boards. Now we'll move into public comments. And I'm going to set up a timer. Can you see my timer?
Yes.
Awesome. So RJ Pilcher, you're first. You'd like to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, hello, I'm RJ Pilcher, 87842 Sandra Street, Florence, Oregon, 97439. I hope that the Western Lane Ambulance District Board had a chance to read my written submission on creating an internal fund for PERS UAL. I know that Chief Schick has. He sent me an email and pointed out that I was getting out of my lane as an appointed budget committee member, that the budget committee is advisory only, and once the board approves the budget, they can do whatever they want. He also pointed out that the Milliman valuation report comes out yearly. Also that there was a 7% reduction in UAL valuation between the 2018 and 2019 years. What Chief Schick did not bring up is that there was an increase of 24.6% between the 2017 and 2018 years. The 7% reduction does not come close to bridge the gap with the previous year's 24.6% increase. Chief Schick's email, he made it very clear that he did not say that a reserve fund is a good tool to manage the district's UAL, or believe that the board should establish a fund. When I met with Chief Schick, he was very well spoken, actually very charismatic. He made it very clear that all he needed was 3 board members on any issue. I want to make it very clear that I do not blame the board of Western Lane Ambulance District or management for the PERS UAL. That blame goes squarely on the shoulders of the Oregon State Legislature. The way PERS is set up, the fox will always be in the henhouse. That is why you need an internal fund. I truly believe a fund should be established and that each year either 150,000 or 5% of the UAL, whichever is least, should be set aside into the fund for managing the district's UAL. So the bottom line is, do you as a board want to have control of your destiny? If so, then you will bring forward a resolution to establish a fund that I lined out in my written correspondence in your consent agenda. If you don't, then leave it where it is and let it ride. I make this request as a taxpayer who resides within the special taxing district of Western Lane Ambulance District so that I stay within my lane. I see that the board packet that you have a chance to discuss this issue, and I look forward to your decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, RJ. So next on our list is Mike Caven. Are you there, Mike?
I'm here.
Great. You're on.
All right, thanks. Mike Haven, 160 Madison, Eugene, Oregon. I'm the president of IFF Local 851 and represent the dedicated members of Western Lane Ambulance. I'll try to be brief on this, and I wrote this down as notes so I don't wander off on you. I don't want to take a lot of your valuable time, but can't remain silent following the paid advertisement made by a member of this body. Last week, we saw Director Farnsworth take out an ad to attack the district leadership, fellow directors, the union, and our members. And after he was unable to sway the bargaining team or his fellow directors to impose draconian cuts to solve what he believes to be a financial crisis. It is unfortunate that the director felt the need to pay for an advertisement to spread misinformation. This break in decorum was unnecessary and disappointing. There are really only 2 points I wanted to address tonight: privatization and PERS debt. We continue to hear Director Farnsworth compare our members' compensation with that for private for-profit ambulance companies. Of course, these companies pay less than Western Lane Ambulance. They need to maintain a profit margin for the owner. The owners of these for-profit ambulance companies know that the average career for a paramedic in the US is less than 7 years, according to the American Ambulance Association. When you can expect your employees will move on, you don't have to focus too much on providing a family wage job. We rely on experienced career paramedics to provide critical care services in this community. With time in service ranging from 4 to 35 years, Western Lane Ambulance paramedics are a valuable and experienced investment for your tax dollars. A lot of focus continues to be placed on PERS debt. The PERS conversation is an important topic to all local governments, and the rates we pay are inclusive of current and future obligations. In the last decade, the Government Accounting Standards Board began to require that future pension obligations are noted as debt services for the budget. This is not a change in what's owed, but a recognition that our members' pensions are debt to the organization. However, this debt is already financed as part of PERS annual rates that all governments pay. Ideally, we would not have this debt obligation, but we do, and 72% of the obligation is attributed to benefits already earned and not charged against the pension. Will not change until the pensioners pass away. The author of this paid advertisement reached the position of captain on the 787, arguably the top of his craft. He worked for United Airlines, one of the best paying airlines around. The average base pilot salary at United is over $100,000 more than the average base at Allegiant, which is a discount airline. I'm not sure what the motivation is for somebody who enjoys a pension from a high-paying airline is to attack our members' wage and benefits. It appears that he believes our members are worth nothing more than low wages offered by private for-profit ambulance providers. Paramedics have similar education requirements and operate with greater autonomy and risk than many RNs. Why should our paramedics work for significantly lower wages? We recognize this was not a board-endorsed advertisement, and we appreciate the work the board collectively does to ensure our members are taken care of and have the resources they need to serve the Florence community. Appreciate your guys' time and have a good night.
Thank you, Mike.
Jesus.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak? Okay. Hearing none. So now we have opportunity for a very rare celebration. We'll be swearing in a new employee for Western Lane Ambulance District, which is a very rare event because it's unusual for us to have an opening in our full-time staff. We are very selective in who we hire, and we've been very fortunate that we've retained an incredible group of EMS providers. I've worked with and for many ambulance agencies in my career, both public and private. And it's just not the industry standard to have as little turnover as we do. And I hope everyone realizes how fortunate we are to have these men and women as our EMS providers. And that's just one of the many reasons I'm proud to be their fire and EMS chief. And I'm very proud to add another exceptional paramedic to our staff tonight. So while I'm running over to the conference room to give the oath to Mackenzie, I asked Chief House just to tell you a little bit about our newest paramedic.
Matt, you're remuted.
There. Mackenzie began with Western Ambulance District in 2018 as a paramedic student while fulfilling her internship requirements. It was identified early on that she was a very caring, compassionate, and extremely studious student. This all translated into a part-time hiring of Mackenzie, when she became licensed with the Oregon Health Authority. Mackenzie continued to demonstrate to us a strong work ethic, being an ultimate team player, exemplary paramedic skills, and she is a tremendous patient advocate while working as a part-time, temporary, full-time employee with the district for the past 2 years. Director's Chief will now begin the swearing-in ceremony for Mackenzie Jeffcott.
Please stand. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
Mackenzie Jeffcott,
Do solemnly swear to do my duty as a paramedic for Western Lane Ambulance District to the best of my ability,
do solemnly swear to do my duty as a paramedic for Western Lane Ambulance District to the best of my ability,
to serve my commanding officers with respect and loyalty,
to serve my commanding officers with respect and loyalty,
to serve the citizens of our community with compassion, courage, and integrity,
to serve the citizens of our communities with compassion, courage, and integrity,
to represent my district and community with honor and dignity both on and off duty,
to represent my district and community with honor and dignity both on and off duty,
and to uphold the laws and constitutions of the United States of America, the state of Oregon, and the communities we protect.
and to uphold the laws and constitutions of the United States of America, the state of Oregon, and the communities we protect.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Now, this is your father.
Yep.
Father's going to pin Mackenzie. Congratulations. You guys are certainly welcome to stay and for the rest of the meeting. This is the highlight. Yes, thank you very much.
Congrats.
Okay, I'm back. That was very exciting. Go on to the consent agenda. Is there any director that would like to pull something out of the consent agenda as listed? Hearing none, the consent agenda will consist of the meeting minutes from the regular meeting, February 25th, staff reports from the chief, office manager, and fire marshal, and correspondence that Mr. RJ Pilcher had sent to us. Now we'll move on to the review of monthly financials for SVFR, Western Lane, and WLFEA.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So both districts are really looking good with their financials. And so I don't have a lot to report tonight. I would like to mention that both districts' tax revenue is already at 97%. And Western Lane patient fees is around 75% for the year. Sayula Valley expenses are a little under budget, but I know they have several projects going. Western Lane expenses are tracking at 65% for personnel services and 54% for materials and services, which is really good because 8 months into the fiscal year, we should be tracking close to 67%. So with that, I turn it over to the board in case anyone has any questions.
I just want to say how great second what you said, Dina, about the financials, and just remember about a year ago how we were struggling and thinking the pandemic would have a big downturn potentially. We might not collect tax revenue. And that was wisely thought at the time, I think, to be conservative, but just really happy to see the revenues really outpacing even last year and expenses so well controlled. So kudos to managing the budget and just real happy with the financials. Look great.
Thank you, Director Yesney. Any other director comments?
I would just like to make one suggestion, and I can do this offline with Dina, on the WLFEA analysis report. It would be helpful to plug in an annual number or a year-to-date number under the budget column for the write-offs.
So you said WLFEA, or do you mean Western
I'm
Land?
sorry, I meant LifeMed. Yeah.
Oh.
So under the LifeMed analysis report, we've got 87,341, and I know how you're calculating that number, and I appreciate that effort. But under the budget column, if we could also put in an annualized number or, month to date, however you'd like to figure that out, that way the actual column and the budget column will be closer in alignment with what we expect to happen. That could be a number that you take from the last rolling 12 months, or it could be the number you picked during the budget season in preparation for this, just by saying, okay, what do we have in the last 12 months? We forecast approximately the same with some increase in revenue. Just a number that you could put in there that as a placeholder for that on the budget column.
So I'm not sure if I can change the budget, though.
No, I'm not asking you to change the budget, but we all know that we have from LifeMed, we are charging contractual write-offs to LifeMed.
Larry, you're talking about not the budget one, but the LifeMed one that you created, which does have a budget column. You'd like a write-off in that one. Got it.
Exactly. So it would just be a little more helpful as a management tool to have a number there. Dina, if you want me to contact you later, I'm happy to do that.
That would be great. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Any other director comments on financials? Okay, we can go on to old business. And our first one is agenda item 8A, discuss moving funds to the local government investment pool. Just before we start the discussion, Director Yesney has offered to go into a breakout room. He would have to recuse himself from a vote on this. And Ron and Mike, I don't know if you guys wanted, he felt that there might be some inhibition of discussion to have OPB related officials here.
It sounds like a good idea to me.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, let me see if I can do this.
So do we need to formally abstain from discussion before we do that?
That would be
Declare a
wise.
conflict. So declaring a potential conflict.
Conflict, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, do you guys see a request to go to a breakout room?
Yep.
Okay, it should just be the three of you. Okay,
We'll go down to the basement. Be back soon.
thank you. Okay, I think I can get them back, but Dina, did you want to lead the discussion?
Sure. The breakout room window is still up on Zoom.
What do you mean?
It's just showing on the screen. I just closed it.
Okay, I think it was just on your screen, yeah.
All right. So this agenda item was on the agenda last month and it got postponed so we could get more information. So basically, a little history, our auditors, Emerald CPA Group and Kathy Taylor Consulting both recommended that we invest some funds into the local government investment pool just because the interest is so good. And so this is basically up for board discussion. We did receive a letter, which is also in your board packet, from Lori Gates at Oregon Pacific Bank, who said that if we could maintain a collective balance between Sayula Valley and Western Lane's money market accounts, at the total of $5 million, they would change our interest rate from 0.1 to 0.2%. So I did a little research on, well, how many months out of the year do we exceed combined that $5 million number? And there was only 1 month. So mostly because of like dry period financing and so on. But if we were to combine the capital reserve, which is just a savings account, with the money market accounts, then combined we would have 8 months out of the year that the balances would exceed 5 million for that 0.2, so for that additional interest. So we're just opening it up for the board to discuss. Again, the LGIP offers 0.7, I think it's 0.75% interest. And that would be for 5 million, around 37,500. And the estimate for the 1% interest would be 5,000 or 10,000 at 2%. So I can turn it over to the board to discuss.
I have a couple of questions. That's a dramatically better rate of return with the state. And everything I read from a standpoint of economics is that the nation's banks are flush with cash. I mean, there's cash everywhere. And interest rates are extremely low. And it's really hard for banks to pay depositors like us and mom and pop savers any kind of reasonable rate of return on their savings. I just wonder, how does the state pay that kind of an interest rate? Anybody know?
I asked Rick Yesney that question today, is how can they do the 0.75%? He thought maybe it had to do with their selling bonds, and that's completely out of my wheelhouse. But I think, Dina, were you going to ask them how they got that, or? But we don't know off the top of our head.
No, the phone call I made, I talked to someone at LGIP and she just said that the interest rate was at 0.75.
Do we know if that money is FDIC insured?
Well, I'm pretty sure it is. It says in the explanation here that it's a Treasury managed Oregon short-term fund, and that it's made up of money from state agencies, public universities, local governments, and there's just many, many governments in this pool.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to this question. But I remember early in COVID, some of the banks were experiencing stress from their depositors who wanted to put their cash in the mattress because they were concerned about FDIC insurance for amounts over $250,000, which I think is the current FDIC limit. And the bank's responses to that were, well, there haven't been any bank failures in a very long time, and also you can subtitle your deposit accounts in slightly different ways and get the multiplier effect if you need it for many different $250,000 accounts.
Yeah.
But I don't believe the state fund is FDIC insured. If it is, that would be really good news to have. But if the state fund is similarly insured to a maximum of $250,000, that would be something to consider no matter where we put the money, whether we put it at Oregon Pacific Bank or if we put it with the state. We need to understand how they're paying that 7%, or excuse me, 0.7%. And I think the rate of return, frankly, is too good to pass up because you can't get that anywhere. I just don't know how they do it. And I'd be concerned that if they are putting the money in riskier investments in the background, that's how they're getting that rate of return. Are our deposits, our funds, at any greater risk than they would be at a local bank? I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm on their website and I'm still trying to find out.
I mean, I think it sounds like a great idea. Obviously, the state has put this program together, but it's 7 times the rate that the local banks can pay. They must have some kind of means to do that.
Well, the question for me is what is the worst case scenario if there is an issue with moving it to that account? Is it going to be lower than 0.2%? Would we drop, let's say we drop below 0.7%, would it be below what we're already getting? I mean, to me, if the worst case scenario is that for some reason we don't get this 0.7, we get 0.3, it's still better than 0.2 or 0.1.
Well, I think the proposal was always 0.7 for the state, and it's
Right.
only the only place where there's a variable is with Oregon Pacific Bank if we drop below 5 million.
Right.
So it's really a question of the difference between 0.2 and 0.7. Am I right, Dina?
Yes.
So there's no risk involved in that. If we moved it over to the state program, there wouldn't be a potential for, because it's wrapped up in investments, for us to lose more than we're putting into it, or lose more than we would get if we stayed with Oregon Pacific and 0.2%.
Yeah, I just don't know what the security of that state fund is. So if Rick was correct, Chief, that they're buying bonds or other assets, are we buying mutual funds? Are we?
Here's a quote from their website. The rate is determined by Treasury staff based on market conditions and yield for fixed income securities such as government and corporate bonds.
So that didn't say anything.
Hey,
It is
Dina?
invested in US dollar dominated high quality short-term fixed income securities.
Yeah, I think it's pretty tough to be fiscally responsible and look at the differences there in the amount of return what we're going to get for that investment. And I just can't see. I love the idea of supporting local businesses and helping the local community and everything. But when we're talking a disparity of $27,500 there, that's a lot of money to let go just so that we can support the local community, the local bank.
I'm looking at their rate has seemed to it fluctuates. January 2017 is 1.15%. April or August 9th, 2019 is 2.6%. And it looks like March 1st, 2021, it's gone down. Now it's gone down to 0.6%. It was at 0.75%. But I think when we talked to them, Dina, was last month, right? So
That's
I think
correct. That was about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, so it's gone down to 0.6%. Director Burns, you got a comment?
Yeah, I understand what Mr. Farnsworth and Mr. Spade, and I wholeheartedly believe and get the best you can, but I do not trust the state of Oregon whatsoever. If you have an agreement with OPB or a local place, and you can fulfill it and they can fulfill it, I do not believe in going outside the area at all.
Well, based on those last numbers that you just gave, Chief, it looks like the worst rate of return was 1.2%. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Which is still better than, it's lower than the 2% if we maintain over $5 million in a local account.
No, it's down to 0.6% now.
So now it's a difference between 0.6 and 0.2.
Right. So worst case scenario is that we're at the lowest end of the OPB account that we currently have. Whereas best case scenario, we could make 7%.
If
I don't see it much of, I'm not a money guy, but I don't see it at as much of a risk.
Okay, so it's not 6 or 7%. It's,
well, I'm sorry, 0.6. Yeah.
right. So it's either, if I understand correctly, Chief, it's either 0.2% if we're above 5 million, or it's 0.6%, and the state rate varies, right?
Correct.
it could be up or it could be down.
Correct.
See if I can show this.
Is that percentage set when we get into the market, or is it when we cash out?
Nope. It can go away.
If you can see, it says rate changes, and those are various months over the last several years. So you can see it does vary probably on market conditions, which makes sense.
1.15% in January 17.
Yes, and now March 1, 2021, it's 0.6%,
0.6.
0.6.
Right. And we're
So-
looking at 0.20
Yes.
as best case scenario from OPB.
Well,
That's if we're above 5 million.
Yeah,
but let,
So the months that were below 5 million, then we drop down to 0.1.
right.
but you look on that sheet the chief just had up there, there was quite a few years it was 2%.
Mhm.
Correct.
And
It
was
can go
on-
up or down.
I was on another public entity board for about 8 years in the past. And we moved quite a bit of our money to this pool. And we reviewed it every year and figured it out that we made a lot more money in the state pool than we ever could have in a local bank here or Eugene, Portland, Seattle. We checked a lot of places. And the other thing about having, like Sam said, the extra $27,500. If you've read any of that PERS information we received today, the only way Western Lane Ambulance or Siuslaw Valley Fire can reduce their PERS rate, you have to increase your assets or decrease, or increase your liabilities. Decrease your liabilities, increase your assets is the only way you can lower your PERS rate. A side account doesn't lower them, and it states right in their information, our PERS account can never be paid off, never.
Never.
So the better we can increase our liabilities, the better it's going to help our PERS rate.
So, and it's not a requirement that we move all of the funds to LGIP or keep all of the funds in Oregon Pacific Bank. You can decide to split it or whatever you want.
Well, what does Dina need from a practical standpoint? If you're moving funds to and from the state, is that a series of wire transfers into and out of our checking account?
Yes, it's really easy to transfer in and out. It's like 5 cents a transaction. So it's just almost like having another bank account, at OPB. It's all online. If the board decides to go with this, I've got just the applications that, we have already filled out that chief and the board presidents would need to sign. And then we could put any amount that the board decides. I mean, even if you just wanted to put 1 million from each district into the LGIP and leave the rest at, the local bank, we could do that. It's, it's very flexible. There's lots of options.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just have the one remaining question. I mean, I agree with John that this is too good to pass up, but I just would like to know a little bit more about the security of the money. I agree with Director Burns. I mean, I would rather trust Oregon Pacific Bank than the state of Oregon with this money. And if they're investing it in securities and that sort of thing, do we have any downside risk? Are these funds FDIC insured? What's the security interest for the district? Are we guaranteed by the state of Oregon by some legislative act that will be made whole? Do you remember, John, how that worked in your other districts?
Larry, I don't, but I knew from what I remember, it was a wash on like FDIC and what we were guaranteed. And I can do some research, and one other thing when we're all talking here about if we leave money at a local lending institution, that they do go out and they help our community. They take that money and they make loans to a business, but we're forgetting that they're paying us a minuscule interest. Then when they loan the money to a household or a business, they're charging quite a bit more interest. They're making money. They're not willing to share that profits with us.
Well, I know that I can't speak for the bank, but I know they loan money at like 2 or 3% these days. So the margins are thin in the banking business.
But
But
anyway,
that's not what we're here to talk about.
no.
I agree with the sentiments of Director Burns and with Director Murphy, but I think we have no path forward here but to approve moving these funds into the state pool to the level that's comfortable for staff to manage the resources. But I would like some follow-up discussion before that deposit is made regarding, you could present that to us after, Chief, but we would just like to know, what is the security of those funds? Are we making a responsible choice here?
And are we penalized if we decide to move money back? Are we penalized by the state, or is there any charges?
And that right there, Chief Scheck, I don't think we'll ever figure out what Larry indicated, Director Farnsworth, or sorry, what guarantees. I think we're more apt to find out what penalize what John has talked about, Director Murphy.
I don't think there's a minimum balance or anything, so I think it's supposed to be very liquid.
Is there a required amount of time the money has to sit there?
And Jim's got his hand up, Chief.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jim, go ahead. You're muted.
You need to unmute, Jim.
Great comments from both sides. Hey, I just have some questions on this from the standpoint. Yeah, I mean, it looks like a great idea. You shift it all over there, but what is the sunset clause? We don't know. How quickly can we remove it? We don't know. Chief, do we have any really large capital purchases coming down the pipe to where it's going to keep us below 5 million on both sides? And is there any incentive from the local bank to help us on any kind of investments in our capital? Do we know?
We have.
It appears that the state of Oregon's not going to do that.
We do have some apparatus purchases on the SVFR side. Capital purchases on Western Lane are pretty low. For the next couple of years, we do have an ambulance coming up soon. Yeah, it'll be tough to maintain the $5 million balance among all of our cash assets.
Because I mean, if we're going to be making large purchases, I would rather see the agency pay them outright instead of financing them. And then they're ours and we don't have to worry about it, or partial payout. I don't know the specific terms, but I'm a little leery about giving the state of Oregon such a significant amount of money. They're dangling a very big carrot in front of a horse. And how far are we going to have to run for it? I don't know. That's just me.
Awkward.
Very.
See, I don't have the same worries that Alan and Jim have. Because I've been involved in using this system for 8 years on another board, and it worked well. But that's just my personal feelings.
Well, looking at the chart that the chief a little while ago, it looked like the worst case scenario was like 0.6%, which is still a far cry above 1 or 0.1 or 0.2%. So, if I'm looking at what our lowest return on the investment is going to be, it's still higher than what we would get leaving it where it is.
And my feelings, Chief Scheck and Miss McClure, Dina, it's either 6 of this, half dozen of this. If we can get a better deal with the state, fine. Do I trust the state? No. Do I trust the local people? Yes, more. But it can go back and forth in either way, depending on how both boards deal with their business.
Are we ready for the question?
Well, could I just ask that we add to the question that you would, Chief, would get back to us with some answer regarding the security interest? And if there's anything in and out, penalties, if there's any other costs, do we have downside risk for the bonds or securities they're buying? What's the size of the pool in total for all government agencies that are participating in that? Is there any FDIC insurance? I mean, I think we're probably ready to make a decision, but there's more information that would be helpful.
And I don't think we have to make the decision tonight. If
No, we don't.
if everybody's more comfortable waiting to get the answers to the questions that have come up, I'm okay waiting another month to make the decision. I want everybody to be comfortable in what we're doing.
It would be helpful for me to present it next month if I had a copy of all of your questions. So if I could ask all the directors to send me their questions so I can have those specific answers ready for you at the April meeting.
Is that okay with all the directors that we do it that way?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm with Bishop Farnsworth.
And Dina, if you have, if they have any public documents or, you know, information about what they are and what they do, that
You know,
would
there's a lot of information online. You just go to local government investment pool or LGIP. There's all kinds of information online.
That's what I just did. And yeah, there's a lot of information, what they investing in. I couldn't find anything on how it's insured or what it's insured.
Well, if you could send us that link, we can do our homework and we can send Dina questions and let's see if we can do this next month.
Absolutely.
Fair.
Will do.
I bet they're having a party in the breakout room.
Probably.
Well, I'm just looking at this here, and according to what I'm reading, most of the investments are in storage facilities. So,
Oh, okay, good.
Right.
Give me the-
I don't know, probably newspapers.
So now we're gonna let them back in and say,
No.
make a decision. Okay. Okay, they've got 30 seconds to come back.
Let's all not talk to them. Oh God, guys, they're there.
Okay, there's
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, okay, got all three of them. Okay.
we're going with pork bellies.
We have discussed this,
Bitcoin.
board members. We are asking for a little bit more information, so we are not going to make a final decision till next month at our board meeting. We just didn't have enough information for most of us.
Okay. Our next old business is we want to bring up for discussion where we're putting funds that we've designated to address PERS liability. And if you remember last year, over the last 2 years, we put 150,000 and 300,000. So we have a total of 450,000.
Chief, I think you froze.
I did freeze. Did you pay the bill? Okay, we'll try this again. So we have $450,000 set aside for PERS unfunded liability with the intent possibly that could be used for rate increases or to take advantage of the state match program for side accounts. Now, as we recall the discussion, it was to set that money aside, but keep it within the general fund. And so we've been asked to revisit that. Should the board establish a reserve fund and put that money in there? So that's the question we would like the board to address. Should we keep it in the general fund? And if we do, we have some new terminology from the state. We could put it reserved for future expenditures, and that has its own separate line. It's not appropriated. To use it, the board would have to approve a supplemental budget. Or the other option is to put it into a reserve fund. The board would establish a reserve fund and say this money is to be used for this purpose. It can only be used for that purpose. But then the board could abolish the fund. In fact, they should look at all their funds to see if they need to maintain those. But they could either use it for designated uses, or they could just put it back in the general fund. So hopefully that's not too confusing, but that's the question we would like to discuss.
Well, I'd like to start. Thank you, Chief, for sending everybody the great information from PERS. I don't know how many of you had a chance to read that, but Director Murphy was correct. If you look at the guide to understanding your rate, and if you look at, like, for example, page 9, there's several references throughout the document where it talks about the only way you can improve your unfunded actuarial liability is to increase your assets, and a side account is an asset. So as I recall, when we went to SDAO and we listened to the past executive director of the PERS agency, the reason that the PERS agency came up with side accounts is because they could see looming rate increases that would be hard for districts across the state to handle. And so they had suggested that they had found some money, and if we applied for a side account, they would give us a 25% match. And that was a tremendous opportunity for us. SVFR was able to take advantage of that. Western Lane missed the opportunity, but we are on the waiting list for that. So we've set this money aside because our PERS liability is quite large. It's been noted that about 73% of our PERS liability is for people who no longer work for us. They're retired. And so you can only come to a conclusion that the reason that we have such a large unfunded actuarial liability is because the state didn't collect enough from us at the time these folks were employed to pay for the benefits they're enjoying now. And the actuaries have to guess about their mortality just like they do for anybody with life insurance. So we have this large unfunded actuarial liability. The state has said if you will set up a side account, we'll help you with it. We'll give you a 25% match. And then the earnings on that side account can be applied to reduce your monthly and yearly rates that attempt to pay your current obligations for PERS and amortize out the liability you have for the 73% that you owe as a district. So, you know, our district has this obligation. The state has tried all kinds of machinations to try and reduce that unfunded liability. As we all know, the state was unsuccessful in reducing benefits retroactively on those who had earned pensions. And so the next thing they tried to do was the side account. And the third thing they did was they changed the 20-year amortization schedule to a 22-year amortization schedule. So they've stretched it out, attempting to make this bitter pill that's paid by the districts, whatever district you're in, a little bit more palatable and manageable. So my assumption as a director was that we had set this money aside for the security of our workers' pensions, and it wasn't to be used for anything else, and that we have placed it in there anticipating that eventually we'll make it to the top of that waiting list and we'll be able to apply the 25% match. As soon as the 25% match is applied, those funds are in an account that are dedicated to our district. They can't go anywhere else, but we can't get them back. They will be there as a side account, and they will represent an asset on our balance sheet, and they'll be used to reduce the increases we'll have in the future. So my concern, and I think some of you others and budget committee members have reflected on, well, if we just have this in the bank and it's a soft line item, PERS, but we can take it out of there if we need it for something else, it's really not the dedicated fund that we intended when we set it up.
Well, and one thing to tag on to Larry, one thing the state never tells us is early on, they talked people in the PERS retirement system to putting, a lot of them had the option of putting their PERS money into a variable account. And the state guaranteed them like 8% return on their investment. So they were paying retirees 8%, and they might have only been making 3%. So the state had a lot to do with this PERS liability on their own accord. And I would rather put the money in a line item in our budget under the future expenditures than give the state a side account, or put our, if we choose to put money in a side account, or that we start a separate account either at a local institution or somewhere and put the money in there so we have it in need of an emergency if we have a major event or something as that. But I don't want to start, personally, I don't want to start a side account with the state of Oregon or put money in our budget for strictly for PERS, because as the state says, that we can't pay that off. So we might as well have the money available in case we need it in an emergency, and we would still have it to increase our assets.
So you're correct, John, in that we can't pay it off, but just to highlight what SVFR did, they did set up a side account. They put 300,000 into it, and they've lost control of it. That's true. The state added 75,000 to that. And we will see a 3.1% decrease in our contribution rate on July 1, 2021 because of that. So yes, it's true. The state controls that. And yeah, I think we all agree that the state's not as trustworthy as we'd like, but we are seeing a 3% decrease in our PERS contribution rate.
And I want a clarification from you, John. There's a 25% match. That's the carrot.
Right. I understand that.
So we don't get that if we just put the money in, a line and not spend it.
And I understand that, but it's 25% we can't spend.
I understand.
That's all my point is.
Yeah, and we're hopefully going to resolve this evening because we are on the waiting list. My assumption has been that if Dina got a phone call tomorrow saying, okay, you've reached the top of the waiting list, we can now award you that 25%, send us your match, that we would do that. Are you suggesting that we not do that?
I'm in favor of a future expenditures line item in our budget and put the monies in there, but that's just me. It's whatever the majority of the directors want to do is what we'll do.
Yeah, my understanding as well is that those monies that would be put in the state, if it were put in a state side account, would earn the PERS rate of return. And I think over time, they have earned a much greater rate of return than we've been able, obviously, to get in our own bank account. I'm very much in favor of looking at funding the side account with the 25% match. I think that'd be a great deal for the district, and those earnings on that account would probably over time be much greater than what we're able to get in our bank account right now. So I would be in favor of looking at that. I think the money is okay where it is. I kind of prefer it to be in the general fund with a little bit more flexibility on how it's used. I don't think even we as a board have a firm strategy for how that money is going to be used yet, if it's ever going to be used. And it's been set aside even to the point that it has its own bank account. So you can also look on the balance sheet and see that 450,000 plus the interest it's earned sitting in the bank account. So the one thing I don't see much of a point in reserving it in a separate fund. It creates more work for staff, for the budget and to track it and for financial reporting. And I'm not sure that we get much benefit from that, but I'm very much in favor of looking at funding a side account if that became available.
And one other thought that just popped into my head, if the reason we are trying to make money with the side account, we could also put the money in a CD and get better interest than just in a regular savings account also.
Yeah, I really have to agree with Larry that 25% is the carrot, that's an immediate 25% return for the district, which makes it very attractive. So.
And I don't know what the answer is to this, but apparently this CARES Act that just passed, there was a substantial amount of money that was in the bill for shoring up pension plans. So it's possible that that will be the funding that will come to the state of Oregon to provide the match for these side accounts. So we could rapidly move to the top of that waiting list if that's in there. I don't know.
I was wondering, Chief, if you might, we have a new representative at the state, Dwayne Wright Boomer. I wonder if we could get a hold of him and find out if there's any talk at the state of reinstituting the site account at the state level.
Sure.
When they did the side account, when SVFR got in on it, wasn't there a dollar limit of how much could be put into that side account?
That's a good, I think there was, but it's pretty high. I think it's in the
like
millions.
It was 10 million, I think.
Oh, okay.
John, I got a question. Basically, we've got rate collars on this, so it won't go up or down beyond amount every year. So the 25 or 22-year amortization will make this go away over time, assuming that their projections are correct. We've got $450,000 that basically is money that could fund 3 different paramedics or 3 additional paramedics for the district. I hate to take the money out of our control at this point in time when we're sitting on the precipice of whether we get the renewal of our levy or not. And it could be critical in bridging a gap if we do not have a levy in place as far as transitioning to a different model. And so that I'm really hesitant. And also, if I'm not mistaken, we're in a pool. And if we pay into a side account, we can't pay down our liability. That's just our portion of the group. All we can do is offset future increases. So having it in our control or in the state control doesn't matter unless we get that 25% match. So if the 25% match is there, I think we need to fund something, but I want to be really careful about how much we spend until we know more about our future funding. And holding it aside in our current budget in a separate line item, I don't think going all the way to the level of a fund in my mind is where I'd want to be right now, because I'm not that secure that we're going to have that much operating cash in the future. But keeping it into a separate line item at the moment, I think makes sense.
Well, Chief, unless anybody else has anything to add, I think
one thing, Larry, maybe we can come to a happy medium that we just leave it in our budget currently for future expenditures. And then if we get an okay on that 25% match, we call a special meeting and decide how much we want to put in there and if we do and move forward.
Yeah, I was going to take it one step further because Dina can help us. She had minutes to act. There won't be time for her to call a meeting because the money will be gone. I mean, if what we heard last time is correct, I mean, you're either on the waiting list, committed for that 25% match. By the time we call a special meeting, they might have run out of money to match us with. So I believe the instruction that we had as a board previously could be kept in place, that we retain our position on the waiting list. If the match is offered, we take it. 25% rate of return is really excellent. And I think the sentiment I'm hearing from my fellow directors is that you want to keep it in a specific line item with the flexibility up to the point at which it might get committed into that state matching fund. Is that where we are? I just think if we have to have a special meeting, we're never going to be eligible to get that match. It'll be gone like the wind.
We had several months advance notice that they were going to open up the match date. So we were okay. It's just that they went several weeks on the first opening date and hardly used any of the money, and then it went in like a half hour on the second date. So we would have advance notice. We would come to the board. What would you like to do? And then we would have Dina waiting on her computer over the enter button, and yes, exactly. Ready to go.
It's like a Garth Brooks concert.
Yeah, get your tickets. So the money is in the general fund now. We're proposing to keep it in reserve for future expenditures. So unless somebody would like to make a motion to move it into a reserve fund, I don't think we need a motion to keep it in the general fund. That's where it is.
Well, I would make a motion to put it in a reserve fund, but I don't think the sentiment of the board is to go in that direction.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Has to be from Western Lane Ambulance.
It does, yes. Hearing none, the motion dies for lack of a second. Any other motions from Western Lane Ambulance District?
So can we be happy with the instruction we've given Dina? If she has a chance to snag the 25%, she should.
Well, I think like the chief said, I mean, I would make a motion that we are notified immediately if we know that the monies is beginning to come available. That way we'll have time to have a special meeting and make a determination.
Okay.
Last time it happened, we were, they had set a date and a time, like 8 a.m. on such and such
Yeah,
date.
I
This
remember
comes
that.
open.
I think we ought to go that route. Let's find out exactly if it's going to be available and when, and have a meeting, and won't take us long to make a decision.
So Dina, can you help us out with the last instruction they gave you? Are we in fact on a waiting list?
Yes, but I think we were pretty far down on the waiting list. We were in a much bigger pool of larger districts with much higher payrolls than ours. And I believe that I can go back and try to find that email that said what place we were in, but I think we were, if off the top of my head, I think we were like, it was 30.
Well, I would just like to ask for a favor, Dina, if you could verify what the circumstances would be if we do, and when we do arrive at the top of the waiting list. Are they going to call you and say, are you ready to press enter? Or will they give us enough time to discuss it as a board? I don't want to miss the opportunity because we didn't have the fastest finger here.
And if I remember correctly, there was some reason we weren't eligible.
We weren't eligible in the fire PERS fund.
First round.
It was based on payroll.
Wasn't it last time that you let them know that, yes, we're interested, and then you had so much time to fund it? And if you chose to fund it with $10 or with $300,000, that was you had the time to determine that.
I think Cindy's recall is correct.
And if you push the button and say, yes, we're interested, we had time to figure out how much money we were going to put into it. That we had a couple of months or something to fully put our money in. And so you pushing the button isn't going to commit us to putting the money in. At the last minute, we can say, oh, forget it, we don't want it. Or we can say, we only want to put $10 in. So I don't see where our directions to Dina would change at all, because we will still have time afterwards to determine if, yes, we are going to still partake, and if so, how much money we're going to put in.
Okay, further discussion.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to new business. This is for SVFR board members. Hopefully you guys are still awake. So we need to appoint a new SVFR budget committee member. Susan, there are 3 applications. one from Joel Marks, one from Stephanie Restrepo, and one from Aaron Houston. Their applications are on board. This is a 3-year term, correct, Dina? It's a 3-year
Yes.
term. Yeah, so this is a new term. And they would be involved in discussions coming up here shortly in the next couple of weeks for SVFR.
Did
Well,
the,
I'd like to maybe raise the comment or the question right now that I think that both boards and at least end of the budget committees need to find a way to work towards better diversity. And we have some control over that when we appoint members to budget committees. We want the right people. We want people who are qualified. But I just throw that out, and I'm appreciative of the fact that we have 1 of 10 members who is not an aging white male on the current boards. And I'd love to see more diversity on everything that we do. So I will make the statement that I work with Aaron Houston, as does Mike and Stephanie Restrepo, but I am confident in Aaron's ability as an accounting manager and a department manager, and would do a good job. And I would make a nomination or a motion to appoint Aaron Houston.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
Ned Hickson seconds. Is there discussion?
Yeah, I totally agree with Director Green, but you know, you have a situation. We just had a issue here that Director Yesney, Director Webb, and Director Green had to go to the ante room, break room, as you indicated, Chief Schick, because they all work for the one bank. Are we running into a situation, the diversity of more of that?
I don't think so. This is budget committee.
Yeah, these are just recommendations. They can't make any decisions.
They have no authority. Yeah.
Oh, but they have directions.
Yeah, but they can't make any decisions without it passing through the board. So they can make their recommendations, but it's a little bit different than a board member who has to recuse themselves from, making a decision on something. And Ron Ron did a great job of saying what I was thinking, which is I think getting some more diversity on the board, some different perspective. Obviously, Aaron has a lot of experience. For me, it was between her and Stephanie Restrepo, just because.
Hold it. You said between her and Stephanie.
I'm sorry, my bad. Between Stephanie and Aaron. Either one would be fine with me. I just, as Ron said, I'd like to see something a little bit different on the board than what we have. Some different perspectives, some different life experience, along with actual practical financial experience. And I think either one of those two would be fine with me.
And President Hickson, I totally agree with you. And in this situation here with somebody in the budget member, they are the ones who asking to be put on. And there's no limit to anybody who can come on. You could have 6 applications, you could have 2 applications. They've taken the time to put their application in, and they need to be considered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah.
It seems like too that these committees that are appointed by the boards are kind of the training ground, for lack of a better term, for people that want to maybe look at additional service. And so if we could look at, those that might want to consider public office down the road, because that's where I think, to me personally, where these boards need better diversity than we have now. So
I call for a vote, Chief Schick.
Absolutely. Holly, can you do a roll call vote, please? And this is to nominate or appoint Aaron Houston to the SVFR Budget Committee.
All right. Director Hickson.
Aye.
Director Polisi.
Aye.
Director Spade.
Yes.
Director Green.
yes.
Director Burns.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Dina will notify Aaron, and my plan is we have a couple new committee members on both sides that I'm going to do just a little brief orientation with our new committee members. We can't talk about the budget. It's just the role of budget committee members. So we'll bring them up to speed real quickly. What's that, Alan?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, our next item is the presentation of the draft WLFEA budget to both districts. We're looking for a consensus agreement on the draft budget. This will have to present the budget separately to each budget committee. So we'll be presenting it to SVFR Budget Committee and the Western Lane Ambulance District Budget Committee. But we want to get, or the board requested that they see it before it goes to the budget committee. So that's where we are now. Staff met with the WLFEA board last week to decide what we would like to present. They gave us feedback. And so that's what you're going to see tonight. Just some highlights. They chose and these are not staff recommendations. Sometimes they went with staff recommendations. Sometimes they decided something else, which is fine. But summary of budget changes, they proposed a 1% cost of living allowance, and this is just for WLFEA employees. Healthcare costs to be shared at 95% employer and 5% employee. Currently, it's at 100% employer paid. And this is very similar to what we did with SVFR with the firefighters. They went from 100%, or will be going from 100% employer covered to 95-5 split. And then we raised their wages one time with the amount of that 5%. So we're giving it to them the one time, and then we take it back to pay for their 5%. The WLFEA directors made that 95-5 decision with the understanding that we would go to 90-10 next year. WLFEA costs to be shared equally. Right now we're at 51.49% with Western Lane Ambulance paying 51%. The WLFEA board wanted to make that an equal share at 50-50. We moved the fire marshal position. That's an administrative position. We moved that to WLFEA. This year it was 100% funded by SVFR, and the WLFEA board wants that to continue to be 100% funded by SVFR. It has a budget impact, but this is the decision a decision I'll make, and I got feedback from the board is we'll be promoting Matt House from division chief to assistant chief, and he certainly has done a great job and worth that. It's contingent on him completing his chief EMS officer certification. And that comes with, I believe, the 5% promotional raise. Included a step raise for my position, and that's contingent on my annual evaluation. For my contract it was 7 steps. And this year I'm on step 4. So I think I'm on step 4. Well, it'll be going up another step. And that's about a 5% raise as well. And then one thing that I didn't list, but I think it's important, and I know I had a director ask me about it today. We would like to move our part-time admin assistant to full-time, at least 30 hours a week. She is pretty much full-time now during June when we do LifeMed. She handles all our LifeMed subscription, receiving their subscriptions and logging that. And then we'd also like to use her to help supplement Tony Miller in the fire marshal's office, a lot of that paperwork. So those are what the changes that were agreed to by the WLFEA board. It is up for discussion. Any comments?
Well, I have a few questions, Chief.
Sure.
And the WLFEA board members can speak and maybe answer this, but I was wondering why you didn't provide a rolling 12 months on the existing expenses, because it's awfully hard to look at this this budget document. I realize that you used 9 months, but it would have been great if you'd used 12 months rolling data to help us compare year to year.
Well, remember that first year it was only in existence for 9 months, so that was the entire.
I understand, but could you not have used the last 12 months?
Well, you've got the adopted budget.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the last 12 months of actual expenses.
So are you
think-
talking about like the history columns, the first preceding year, 2019 to 20?
Yeah, I was just in terms of budget preparation, we realize that this is a new animal here, but as we're looking at the adopted budget versus the actual expenses, you've listed 9 months there. So we're trying to annualize this in our heads, trying to figure out, okay, how these numbers came together. Did WFEA board look at this at all?
But it started on October 1st. So how can you do 12 months when there was only 9 months of operation?
Okay, well, I was trying to calculate what the expenses are tracking to, even if it crosses over the fiscal year. Is that not something you could do?
Well, I could, because it was the IGA before.
Yeah, I understand. So what I'm trying to point out is if we go to, for example, if we look at materials and services, you've got $62,000 worth of expenses for 9 months with a $100,000 budget, and you've got a $120,000 budget proposed for materials and services. Is that like a 25% increase? I'm just trying to figure out how the expenses for 9 months will track any higher than the 100,000 that was budgeted last year. What's the justification for going to 120?
Well, I think you need to develop some history to have the full 12 months to compare, right?
Well, I'm just asking, how did you get to 120,000 from 62,000 over 9 months? If you annualize that,
Right.
how did you get to 120,000?
Well, every year, I mean, since this is new, every year we are like moving more into, as we try to eliminate duplicate costs, we try to bring them into WLFEA so, that it's not being duplicated by paying it in the other district. So this is a work in progress.
No, I think I understand. Director Parsons, I understand your question. It's how did we come up with that number when we're just comparing it to an adopted number? So we're looking at 2 adopted numbers versus actual expenses. And I think, if you look at our budget, which shows budgets versus actual, I don't know if that would help.
Well, I remember, Chief, that when we spoke about the budget last year, we talked about zero-based budgeting, and that clearly hasn't been adopted here. If you take the 62,715, divide that by 9, and multiply it by 12, it comes out to $84,000, not 120,000. So what is the basis for going from the annualized existing expenses for 9 months from 84,000 all the way to 120?
Yeah, but these are actual expenses.
I understand their actual expenses. Why would we expect them to be any higher than actual expenses?
Because we're taking more expenses into WLFEA that aren't being paid by Siuslaw Valley or Western Lane.
I thought you'd been doing that this entire 9-month period.
We are. That's what we're doing.
So if you have already done that, if there are not new expenses to add into that, then why would it go from 84,000 to 120? It's a simple question.
I just don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
Can I, and this brings up another
I
question,
understand.
but on page 68 of our packet, I guess it's page 4 of the WLFEA budget, has a breakdown by line item. And the big thing I see is IT services in the preceding 9 months was 15,000, goes to 48,000 in the adopted budget. And that's a significant increase. And do you know why that is that way, Dina? Or
Well, yeah, because we're picking up when we got the contract with Step Up IT Services, we contracted, WLFEA contracted with Step Up. So they are covering both Western Lane and Siuslaw Valley. You will not see IT service expenses in either of those districts this year.
So I think that's a big part of the increase between the, prorating the 62 to the 100.
So the $15,000 that was spent in the 9 months, are you suggesting, Dina, that the 48,000 that was approved in the budget is still being paid by the two agencies separately?
No, WLFEA is paying for that. If you look at your financial reports.
Okay, so how do we get from 15,000 to 48,000?
Well, we were with a different IT company for the 15,000, and I believe that it was split. I believe that the districts were still paying a portion of that. It was, like I say, this has been a work in progress, and things change over time. So, you know, I can.
My question is, if we're going from 15,000 to 48,000, are you suggesting that the difference between those two numbers is going to be paid in the 3 months of the fiscal year that are not included in the first preceding 9 months? Where is that money? When is it going to be paid, or when was it paid, or when will it be paid?
I'm sorry, I'm just not following you. I mean, do you want to go back and look at the financials?
No, I'm just curious about this budget document. Are the IT costs with the new company that we're proposing to do business with, are they proposing a package that costs $50,000 a year?
Yes, there is going to be a 5% increase as of July 1.
Okay, so it would be more correct to say that the $15,000 doesn't represent the total cost in the preceding 12 months when that's realized.
Oh, absolutely. That's correct.
Okay, so there's going to be payments that will show up between the 15,000 and the 48,000, right?
So the 15,000 was paid last fiscal year. And like I say, it was with a different company, and it was transitional in the middle of the year. So it's, I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Dina, maybe what do we pay monthly now to our new IT company?
It's approximately $4,000 a month.
So we have $12,000 that WLFEA is going to pay them. And the 50,000 in the proposed by budget officer column is what the new IT company's charges will be that we approved at a previous board member when we had the RFPs that we went through that was presented by Dina. We did not choose the cheapest company. We chose what we thought was the best for us and the quality of the company.
Well, my question has been answered. I just, the presentation of the budget was difficult to make that determination.
Thank you.
See how we went from the 15. And thank you, Chief, for the other explanations about the different increases in pay for yourself and for Matt, and also adding the hours for the other admin assistant. So I have just a question. Do we have identified salary ranges for every person on the staff at WLFEA in terms of what is their maximum pay, or does that always go up every year? How does that work? Do you have those?
Yeah, we do have ranges for the positions. It could, once they reach their top step, then it would be dependent on a COLA, whether or not their salary goes up.
I see. And in that respect, are these admin assistant positions, for example, are they different or are they the same?
They have.
Go ahead, Chief.
They have different responsibilities. They're equivalent. So like Holly does, she focuses on payroll, and Mary focuses on PERS and volunteer recruitment. And so they have similar function, and they function at the same level, and they can trade off with each other.
Okay. So what efforts does the district make to compare that to people in the private sector?
I've looked at what the city of Florence pays for administrative assistants, and I didn't go into detail in job descriptions, but we seem to be comparable to what they're calling administrative assistants.
Well, that's a pretty broad title and lets you know what's going on by that person. Is that person an accounts payable clerk and accounts payable, accounts receivable?
Which they do, which our admin assistants do, and could you call like Holly a payroll clerk?
Right, I
So
understand.
we're in that ballpark.
Okay. All right. So last question. I noticed that you're moving staff to 95.5 on the health insurance. Are you moving them to any option other than option 1?
No, that wasn't discussed.
Okay.
And the reason it wasn't discussed, Larry, the new renewals have not come out yet. And at the time we have to renew health insurance, I'm sure we will have those discussions.
Okay. Well, my suggestion would be as it was during labor negotiations. Chief, I know that you have a contract. I know that Matt has a contract. I know that Dina has a contract. I think it's difficult to lead the district, whether it's SVFR or Western Lane, and ask your employees to have a 90-10 or a 90-50 healthcare contribution when the leaders of the organization don't do that as well.
The plan was for all three of us to go to 95.5.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, we had one employee that was at 90-10, so that represents an increase.
No, I believe didn't we move them all to 100%?
Yeah, when the employees from Western Lane came over into WLFEA, they became 100% paid.
Okay, so all of the WLFEA employees have 100% of their healthcare costs paid pending this budget when they will go to 95% coverage, but you're going to give them a 5% pay bump in the first year only to make up for that.
And that's just what the healthcare, so it ranges from $500 to $1,500 a year.
Well, the only point I would make about that is really wonderful for the employees in this district that they enjoy a benefit that is far and away better than what anyone can get in Florence. That's all my comments.
Thank you. Other directors?
I have a question, Chief.
Alan, go ahead.
Thank you. You were talking about earlier WLFEA employees that certain steps, correct?
Yes.
In their pay range. I do not necessarily need names. I don't want names, but I'd like to know, one, how many there are total and what steps each one is. Like you indicated, Chief Schick, you just completed step 4, if I remember correct.
Correct. I'm the only one that has any steps left. Everybody else is that top step.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Sure. Director Polisi, got your hand up.
Yes, I do. Good evening, everyone on both boards. I've been listening about step increases and economy to scale and everything. And I just have a real difficult time understanding to what certain groups want to pay public service for emergency services. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Emergency services are a life insurance policy, whether it be fire, medical, whatever. And you're gonna only retain those professionals that you pay what they're worth. If you drop their salaries and you drop their benefits, you're gonna end up with a revolving agency door. I'm not for that. I never have been and I never will be. And another thing, you're asking people to do more with less. And when you start doubling and tripling the amount of workload on an employee, you're going to burn them out. Whether they're flying an airplane or driving a bus, you're going to burn them out. And I'm not for that. And the fire chief, EMS chief deserves a pay raise. The ops chief, he deserves to be moved up. The paramedics, they deserve everything they have coming to them and more. The firefighters that are achieving higher status, they deserve even more. And I'm getting really irritated by hearing about cut this, cut that, and so on and so forth. Grow up. The people need service. Our visitors to our community are draining our services. And I'll end it with this. I am not going to vote ever again for any decrease in any employee contributions or any employee potential raises. I'm done.
Thank you, Director Polisi. Is any other director comments? Director Burns.
Yeah, thanks. I want to compliment Larry Farnsworth on your ad last week. I read every bit of it, Larry. You opened my eyes on some things. I agree with some of the stuff that you said.
Alan, can we save this for director comments section? We're trying to
Correct me if I'm wrong, Director Murphy. Chief Schick just said director's comments.
No,
on this budget document is where we are in the agenda.
We're still on WLFEA. Sorry, Director Burns. I meant any director comments on the WLFEA budget. So what we would like the boards to do is approve this budget for submission to the budget committees where it'll be discussed further. And then of course the board will have to adopt it at some point after it's whatever form is approved by the budget committees.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve this to go on to the budget committee for further consideration.
So that's just for SVFR. So, okay, you have Director Hickson made the motion and Director Burns seconded. Any discussion by SVFR board members? So Holly, can you do a roll call?
Director Hickson,
Yes.
Director Polisi,
Yes.
Director Spade,
There.
Yes.
Director Green,
Yes.
Director Burns.
Yes.
Okay. For Western Lane Ambulance District.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, Director
I'll
Webb.
second.
Was that Director Russell?
Director Russell, second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Holly, can you do a roll call vote?
Director Murphy,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Webb,
Yes.
Director Yesney,
Yes.
Director Farnsworth.
No.
Okay, thank you, directors. Now, director comments.
I'll start with the Western Lane Ambulance Board. Mike Webb, do you have any comments?
Just a real brief comment. Just wanted to say that the district several years ago made a choice to be a public agency, and you live within public agencies as far as some of the expenses you incur. We chose the business model to be the most effective and efficient in providing safety services. We didn't choose to be the least expensive. And we've been trying to make choices as far as funding and requesting funds pertaining to that. The intention is to provide a good, strong service for our district, to be responsive to the people of the district, and to save lives. We're not just trying to meet or be the skinniest budget around. We're actually trying to do something with the money we have to better serve the people. If anything, I would like to have more money dedicated to the district so we could better serve the people. And with that, that's my comment.
Larry, do you have any comments?
I'll wait for the other directors.
Rick Yesney?
Well, I pretty much echo what Mike has said, and I do have to say there was concern a year ago over being able to live within our means, and I think we have, with the negotiation and help with the union, and some really good news on PERS and PERS rates that came in much lower than we projected, can keep the same level of service within the existing financial model we have, and I'm very happy about that, because we have just excellent service in this community, and our ambulance service is a key part of our overall rural healthcare, and I'm just really happy to see that we can continue. I believe that we'll be able to continue to fund that at our current levels with our tax base and our levy. Quite a difference between now and a year ago, and in what we were looking at, and I hope we can continue to work with our union and our staff and board members in keeping the level of service at where it's at for the community. Thank you.
Cindy Russell.
Yes, I have comments. I find myself compelled to make this statement at this time in view of the recent events, in particular the article in the paper. Each of the directors comes with different backgrounds, and I am here to help bring a voice to the quality portion of the district. First, I would like to start by once again reminding the board and the public of our mission statement for our organization, and that is to provide quick, efficient, professional emergency transport and community education with the highest standards of excellence. Many times in the recent past, it's been stated that paramedics have just an associate's degree and that they are overpaid. I am here to inform you that I am among those that hold just an associate's degree. And yes, I have made the amount per year listed in the newspaper article mentioned several times, several years and more. And I might mention that I did not work any overtime doing it. And I am in medicine, I'm an RN. For the public's benefit, I feel that they should know that our paramedics do have associate's degrees, but they also hold bachelor's and master's degrees. Also, in order to perform their positions, they also have to hold certain certifications that have to be renewed, some on an annual and biannual basis. To mention some of them: basic life support, advanced life support, pediatric life support, neonatal resuscitation, pre-hospital trauma life support, 100 through 800. Also incident command structure. Once they complete their required courses in school, they are subject to national and state exams, internships, in the hopes of securing a part-time job. If not, then they usually volunteer, hoping that that full-time job will soon come in. Previous Western Lane Ambulance Manager Henry Hanoff and previous board members recognized the opportunity to provide a higher level of service to our community by encouraging our crews to seek above and beyond with their education and getting the critical care paramedic. By receiving this training, our paramedics are trained in hemodynamic monitoring, ventilator management, expanded IV medication infusions, and enhanced knowledge of human pathophysiology. In reality, they are better clinicians because of this training. And is this really a bad thing? In this district, our crews multiple times a day are transporting critical care patients out of the area. If the community were to lose this service, many more people would have to be flown to a higher level of care, and to just get on one of these flights, either helicopter or fixed wing, it starts at $50,000. And it goes according to how many drips you have or what care has to be rendered. This would be if an area ambulance could land in our versatile weather region. In addition, we generate more revenue from these specialty care transports. I'm here to say, yes, I am here for the crews, and I'm proud of it. I believe that if you take care of the crews, keep them educated, in turn, they will give the best care possible to community members. I know the cost of bringing in a new RN starts at about $60,000 just to train them to get them ready to take patients. From my understanding, the cost of hiring a new paramedic would be a close comparison. Presently, we have a stellar group of people working for our district. Their longevity with the district is a testament to our district. which leads to the statement that the public doesn't care what they pay for an ambulance service. I'm referring to the fact that when you call 911 and your family member is on the floor, collapsed, what you're looking for is stellar life-saving services. What you want is the best of the best, and that's what you deserve with our district. You don't want someone that's just out of school and without the education and experience to give the best possible care. I just hope that the public will take a complete look at what our district is all about and how it's being watched over. The district is staffed with caring and committed personnel.
Larry?
That's all I have.
Larry?
Well, I thank all of the directors for their comments, and I agree with much of what they've said. We do have a stellar group of paramedics working in our district, and I want to congratulate Mackenzie for her new position. That's great for her, great for our district. It's great for diversity. There's no question that we have an outstanding group of people we work with, but every single chief of this department will tell you that from their perspective in the past, that we are overcompensating these staff members, and the taxpayers need to understand what that dynamic is. So that's the direction we're going. We're having that debate. That's a great thing for our community. As you recall, in our editorial, we expressed to the public what we were concerned about in terms of the economic condition of our district and the direction it was going. The chief was clear that this district would go out of business if the continued slope of expenses kept rising above revenues. We were all in consensus, 100%, on the corrections we needed to make in the collective bargaining agreement to effectuate that change, that improvement. We weren't proposing operational changes to the district. We were just proposing economic changes. Now, every small business in town in Florence would like to pay their employees too much so that they'd never have any turnover. That's just not reality. So the question will be for taxpayers to decide. Somebody has to represent taxpayers. It will be very important for us to have this debate in our community, to have full disclosure, to have all this information in front of people, and the voters will decide when the levy comes up if they would rather contract out with a private service or if they would like to continue the present operation. That's for taxpayers to decide. It's not for this board to decide. So when that debate takes place, everybody will have a voice, everybody will know what's on the table, everybody will understand what the compensation levels are, and we can all make a decision. And whatever the voters decide, we have to all be good with that, because that's the democracy we live in. Thank you.
And I'll make one comment as Western Lane Ambulance Board, then I'll turn it over to Ned, and then I'll come back and finish up with the WLFEA board for comments. And my comment is, as board chair of Western Lane Ambulance, I'm starting a Western Lane Ambulance District Levy Support Committee. The first two members I'm going to appoint are Mike Webb and Rick Yesney. And this committee will grow. Rick has agreed to stay on as a community member when his term as board is up. And we'll have employees of Western Lane Ambulance, of Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue. We will have different facets of community members. And if this committee decides that they are want to turn into a PAC, Mr. Yesney has stepped forward and said he will be the treasurer of the PAC for the committee. Thank you, Ned.
Thanks, John. First, I'd just like to ask if are there any Siuslaw Valley Fire board members who'd like to say anything?
Yeah, Ned, I was Director Spade. I was hired by the people of our community here to represent them in the debate that goes on concerning the services we get and the cost we pay for that services. And that I think that I was not hired by the employees of the Siuslaw Fire District. I was employed by the people of the community, and that's who I plan on representing, the people of the community and what they want. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Jim?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the fact that when we all engaged in this, I don't know, 18 months ago, we were looking about consolidation and merging and better services. And I still believe that. And I highly recommend that we look to the long term as to what we're trying to achieve here for the community and everybody that visits here. And that means better services combined as one, not two. We've got some really talented people on both sides of the house, whether it be EMS or fire. They're really good people. I've watched them, and I've seen a lot of big cities wishing they could have what we have, and we have it. And all I'm saying is don't close the back door to what could be better. And with that, I'll back off.
Ron?
At times it feels like Florence is literally an island. We live in this small area. It's at least an hour drive to a metropolitan area, if you want to call Eugene that. Nothing really to the north, hour to the south. And the quality of life that I enjoy personally here, I'm sure all of you as well on this call, comes from some investment. And to me, there are 3 agencies in our community that drive every ounce of economic development in Florence, and Peace Harbor Medical Center, Western Lane Ambulance, and Southeast Valley Fire, and of course by association then the EMS Authority. I take the oath of fiscal responsibility, as an appropriate action of our role as a board member. But I do think that we have to continue to remind ourselves that there is the need for ongoing local reinvestment, because we're literally on our own. And this quality of life, this economic development, people move here because of those 3 agencies. It's the driver of our town. So I echo the comments here on fiscal responsibility, but I honestly would love to see the districts put quality first. But whoever said this is a decision for taxpayers, and that's where the debate will be had. And I support that as well. But living here, wanting to be here, and expect the quality of service that we have here comes at a cost.
Alan?
Thank you, Ned. I think the biggest thing before John cut me off was the fact that Larry and RJ is absolutely correct. They put the information out for the public, and the public will make the decision. I am very embarrassed to the point that we had a director comment about whether you drive a bus or fly an airplane. I'm sorry, Larry, for that. As Director Polizzi indicated, he's watched, both the EMS and the firemen. I've worked with them for the last 33 years. You put the information out there, and it needs to be out there for the taxpayers. And that's who each and every 10 of us who hired us, who voted for us to do this. We may not agree, RJ, we may not agree, Larry. None of us may agree with one another, but it's still, we work for the public. And I would like one thing, Ned, if I may. I like these Zoom meetings, but I would hope, since coming tomorrow, we're in the low category, that we as a body in Southeast Valley Fire and Rescue consider having a meetings in maybe 2 months, face-to-face, back in the board meetings.
Thanks, Alan.
These are okay, but it just doesn't cut it for me.
All right, thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Ned.
Just a couple things in regard to the last thing that Alan mentioned. I would definitely like to throw out there that we consider the return to live meetings at the fire station, maybe within the next 2 to 4 weeks. We'll see what happens after spring break. Here in Florence, we've been pretty packed. So if we don't see a spike, maybe it's something we can begin talking about, returning to in-person meetings. And as far as the rest, I've tried really, really hard to keep my personal position as editor different from my position here as the fire board president. But I do want to clarify that there's a difference between articles and editorials, and people who send in letters to the editor or guest viewpoints is not an article. These are important opportunities for people to express their opinions. I know there's been some back and forth about the guest viewpoint and the ad that was placed. I also want to clarify there's a difference between guest viewpoint and ads. One is paid for, one is not. But ultimately, I think it's important that we have this conversation. I'm glad that we're having it now rather than September, October, November of next year. I think it's important that people understand both sides of the equation and where people are coming from, because in the end, we all work for the taxpayers, or we're all elected in because of the taxpayers, and it's our responsibility to present to them as much information as we can so they can make an educated decision moving forward. I agree with some of what Larry says. I don't agree with all of it, and I agree with some of the other aspects and not all of that. I think anytime that we can take a look at what we're doing and take a hard look at it and make a decision based on the facts, ultimately it's the taxpayers who decide where we go from here. If they decide that the value of what they're paying for through the levy is worth it, we support that. If they decide that, you know what, I think there's got to be a line drawn in the sand as to how much we pay for this, then we respect that. I think any opportunity that we have to present a larger perspective is a good one. And ultimately we can all make a decision based on the most information we have available to us. So I'm looking forward to seeing what transpires based on the information that's being presented by both sides. And ultimately, I think as a community, we will be better for it. And that's all I have to say on that.
Okay, I will now go to the WLFEA board. Jim, you got any more comments?
No, I'm sorry I had to step away. There was a solicitor at the door that can't read. No solicitors. But no, I appreciate everybody's comments. I think all of you know how passionate I am about public safety after spending 35 professional years doing it. I flash back on certain things that happened to me in my past, and that's coming from a bigger area with a bigger budget, when people that were devastated by very horrible incidents, fatality fires, fatality accidents, and people would say, how come there weren't more of you? I don't know. I get it, it gets frustrating. Would they have made a difference? I don't know. But I know that from my professional standpoint, I can never see degrading what needs to be done there for all of us. I don't want any of us to ever go through things that I have seen and have personally been involved with. So, you know, when we talk about budgets and spending money on people, it's there for a reason. These are professionals who want to make a difference. And yeah, it's going to cost, but I would rather pay it now than suffer in the end. So, you know, everybody on both boards are really phenomenal people. You all have some incredible ideas. I may not agree with all of them, but boy, I sure learned from them. And I just want to see us go forward. That's all. And one other thing, I've watched our people in doing their job. They didn't know it, but I watched them. I watched the EMS and the fire people. Boy, I was impressed. They were really dialed in. There was one medical call that, boy, they assessed the patient, packaged that person up, and boy, they were gone. And they did it with some real professionalism. So my hat's off to both Western Lane folks and SVFR. With that, I'll step out.
Cindy, do you have any more comments?
No, I do not.
Sam Spade?
No further comments.
All right. I am going to ask the chief to bring to our April meeting a presentation on what we would look like if we moved all employees to WLFEA for the ease of operation, manning fire and ambulance districts. I think that's a very important thing for us to have when we go into strategic planning, so we can start making some decisions for the district. And then before I turn it over to the chief for a minute, I'm going to ask the chief to inform us where we're at in the strategic planning process. But I just want to remind everybody that the board members, budget committee members, and staff, we all have different passion levels as to our interest in emergency services in Florence. So moving forward, let's just respect each other. Budget committee time, let's listen to everybody's opinion and treat each other civilly. And, you know, personal opinion, if it wasn't for the staff that Peace Health had at our emergency room and the care that a friend of mine got with Western Lane Ambulance being transported to Eugene, they wouldn't make it. So I really appreciate the level of care that we do give our patrons in the district. So Chief, could you enlighten us where we are in the strategic planning process, please?
Yeah, LCOG, remember, is going to work with us on our strategic plan. Jacob Callister, I just talked to him today, as a matter of fact. He had just some final questions that he wanted some answers for before he puts a final scope together. And I assume that we're going to be starting here probably within 2 months. We were looking at the May timeframe. He had questions like, what length of strategic plan were we looking for? And I recommended a 5-year plan, as we've done before with annual reviews, very typical for strategic plans. But then, you know, we're flexible. We'll bring it to the board. And as a reminder, we've got citizen polling that's going to come out in May as well, where we can get some feedback, and then we'll tie that into the strategic plan. So I think we're on track. And we should be getting some more paperwork from LCOG, a little better description of what we're going to be doing on our strategic plan soon. And that's it, John.
All right. Anybody else have any comments for the good of the order, or is it all good night?
Can we just get a prospective calendar if the chief has one on strategic planning too?
Sure, you bet, Larry.
He has not put a calendar out yet. I think our original agreement was we were looking at May. I think it's going to come out in their scope of practice. They're finishing up other strategic plans. I think they're working with the Port of Siuslaw right now. So it's just a matter of their availability. But we had settled on May as the start date. Any other questions? So SVFR and Western Lane Ambulance District, those meetings are adjourned. WLFEA will go into executive session. And thanks everybody for spirited discussion tonight.
Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely. And Dina, if you could read the executive session statement.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, Jim, you stay, don't leave.
I'm not leaving.
Okay, so following adjournment, the Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority Board will meet in executive session per ORS 1926602I to review and evaluate the performance of the fire and EMS chief. Representatives of the news media and designated individuals are allowed to attend this session. All other audience members must leave the meeting. News media representatives and other attendees are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations made during the executive session, except to state the general subject as stated in the ORS. No final decisions will be made during the session. The board will return to open session if action is to be taken.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording, Chief, and then we are recording.
Okay, directors of WLFEA, we are now back in open session. Would somebody like to entertain a motion, please?
Yes, I would. I would like to make a motion that we move the fire chief up to the next level within his range of his contract.
And I second it.
And clarification, that would be from step 5 to step 6 on the pay scale.
That is correct.
Dina, would you ask for a roll call vote, please?
I will make the roll call vote. Director Murphy,
Yes.
Director Spade,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Polisi.
Yes.
And any other things for the good of the order, fellow board members?
We're done.
Done, then we are adjourned at 8:15 p.m. Thank you, folks.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
You.
Good night.
Good job, John. Way to
Good
go.
night.